My husband Derek and his fraternity brothers thought it would be funny to leave me stranded in Barcelona at 2 in the morning after a fight. Let's see if Princess can survive one night without credit cards, they laughed, driving off. I didn't go home. 4 months later, he tracked me down to a vineyard in Portugal. I was already building a new life. The bass from the nightclub still pounded in my ears as I watched the taillights of Derek's rental van disappear down the narrow Barcelona street. My mouth hung open, my last words still echoing uselessly in the humid night air. Around me, drunk revelers stumbled past, their laughter mixing with the distant thrum of electronic music. The Gothic Quarter's medieval buildings suddenly felt oppressive, closing in on me in the darkness. He's coming back, I told myself, pulling my thin cardigan tighter. This is just to scare me. But as minutes became an hour, as the club started closing and the crowds thinned, a cold certainty settled in my stomach. My phone showed 3:47 a.m. Still no message. I tried calling Derek again. The call went straight to voicemail, just like the 17 times before. Before we begin, I want to thank each of you for being part of this community. If stories of women finding strength in impossible situations resonate with you, consider subscribing to The Secret Bonds. It's free and helps support more stories of resilience. Now let me share how one cruel night became the catalyst for my freedom. The fight had started innocently enough. We were in Barcelona for Jake's bachelor party reunion, Derek's college friends celebrating their annual boys' trip. I'd been reluctantly invited only because Derek's boss had mentioned it would be good for his image to have his wife along, show he was mature and settled. But after 3 days of watching them relive their fraternity glory days, I'd had enough. That night at the club, when Jake's cousins started grinding against me on the dance floor while Derek laughed and filmed it, I'd pushed away and headed for the exit. Derek followed me outside, his words slurred but his anger sharp and precise. "You're embarrassing me in front of my brothers," he hissed. "Your friend was groping me, Derek. You were encouraging it." "Oh my God, Maya. It's a joke. You're so uptight. This is why none of them like you." He pulled out his phone, texting someone. "You know what? I'm done babysitting you. The guys want to hit another club. It's 3 in the morning. I want to go back to the hotel." "Then go. You're a big girl." He turned toward the curb where a van was pulling up. His friends leaned out the windows, whooping. "Derek, I started," but he was already climbing into the van. "Figure it out," he called back. "You always tell me how independent you are, how you had that big marketing career before you married me. Let's see how independent you really are." Marcus, one of his frat brothers, leaned out and yelled, "Bet she calls her daddy by morning." They all laughed. "Derek, my credit cards are in your wallet. You asked me to give them to you at check-in, remember?" His face appeared in the window, and for a moment I thought I saw hesitation. Then Jake said something I couldn't hear, and Derek's expression hardened. "You've got your passport in that purse, right? You'll figure it out. You always do." The van pulled away, leaving me in a cloud of exhaust and the echo of their laughter. I stood frozen for a long moment, my brain refusing to process what had just happened. Then I checked my phone, 4:02 a.m. Battery at 15%. I'd left my charger in the hotel room. The hotel where Derek had the key card. The hotel that was registered under his name and credit card. I tried calling again. Blocked. I tried texting. The messages showed as delivered but unread. Panic rising. I tried Marcus, then Jake, then every one of Derek's friends whose numbers I had. Every single one had blocked me. That's when I realized this wasn't a drunken impulse. This was coordinated. Planned. A group of grown men in their late 30s had decided it would be hilarious to abandon a woman alone in a foreign city in the middle of the night with no money and no way to get help. To teach me a lesson about being too controlling, too uptight, not fun enough. I opened my small crossbody purse and took inventory. My passport, my phone at 14%, a lipstick, my apartment keys, useless here, and 45 euros in cash, all I'd grabbed for the club. Not enough for a hotel room. Not enough for a flight. Barely enough for food. The sky was just starting to lighten when I found myself in a 24-hour McDonald's near Las Ramblas. The harsh fluorescent lights made my eyes ache. I bought a coffee for 2 euros and sat in a corner booth, watching the night shift workers and early morning street cleaners come and go. My phone died at 5:34 a.m. I could call my brother David. The thought circled in my mind as I nursed my cold coffee. One call from a payphone or borrowed phone, and he'd wire me money for a flight home to Chicago. But David had never liked Derek, had warned me about the red flags. He's too controlling, Maya, the way he handles your money, the way he talks to you. And I defended Derek every time, pulled away from my brother until our relationship became stilted and distant. Calling him now would mean admitting he'd been right all along. More than that, it would mean going back to the life I'd carefully constructed, where I'd made myself smaller and smaller to fit into Derek's expanding ego. Back to the Chicago townhouse where every piece of furniture had been chosen by Derek's interior designer. Back to being the wife who'd given up her promising marketing career because Derek had convinced me we didn't need my income, that his finance director salary was enough, that I should focus on supporting his career instead. The second day, I found a women's shelter through a kind woman at a pharmacy who spoke English. The counselor there, Marta, listened to my story with sad, knowing eyes. "This happens more than you think," she said in accented English. "Men who think treating women badly is funny." She let me charge my phone and gave me access to a computer. I logged into my email, my hands shaking. Nothing from Derek, but there were messages from David, just checking in like he did every few weeks despite my distant responses. I stared at his name for a long time before closing the browser. Marta noticed. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "the hardest person to ask for help is the one who warned us. But pride is expensive, no?" I nodded, tears finally spilling over. I don't know who I am without being Derek's wife. I don't know how to go back and admit I made myself disappear for him. "So don't go back," Marta said simply. She pulled out a map. "You have EU passport stamp. You can travel. Portugal is close. 3-hour bus ride. Beautiful country. Cheaper than Spain. Many need workers for harvest season." I stared at the map, at the border just a short distance away. What would I do in Portugal? She shrugged. "What do you do best?" I used to be good at marketing, building brands, connecting with people. But that was before. I trailed off. Before is not gone. It's just sleeping. She circled a region on the map. Douro Valley, wine country. Small guest houses always need help. Tourist season. You have skills they need. She wrote down a few names and addresses. "These are places with good owners. Tell them Marta sent you." That afternoon, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. I went to a pawn shop in El Raval and sold the only valuable thing I had, my watch that had been my parents' anniversary gift before they died. The watch I'd worn every day for 8 years, the last physical connection to them. The owner offered me €230, probably a quarter of its actual value. I took it. With that money, I bought a phone charger, a small backpack, 2 changes of clothes from a thrift store, and a bus ticket to Porto, Portugal. As the bus pulled away from Barcelona that evening, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not just fear or sadness, but a strange, tentative sense of possibility. Derek had meant to break me by leaving me helpless. Instead, he'd accidentally given me permission to disappear. The Douro Valley revealed itself in layers as the bus wound through northern Portugal. First, the city of Porto gave way to suburbs, then to rolling hills covered in geometric terraces of grapevines. The late September sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber. When the bus finally stopped in a small town called Pinhao, I stepped off into air that smelled of earth and ripening grapes. The directions Marta had given me led to a quinta, a wine estate, about 3 kilometers from town. I started walking in the fading light, my thrift store sneakers already rubbing blisters on my heels. The road climbed steadily upward, winding between vineyard terraces that seemed to glow in the sunset. I didn't make it. Halfway up the hill, my vision started to swim. 3 days of stress, minimal food, and emotional exhaustion finally caught up with me. The world tilted sideways, and I remember thinking clearly, this is how it ends. Abandoned by my husband in Barcelona, only to collapse alone on a Portuguese hillside. There was an ironic poetry to it. Then I heard a voice, sharp and concerned. "Minha nossa. Está bem." Weathered hands grabbed my arms as I swayed. An elderly woman's face swam into focus, deeply tanned and creased with concern. She was calling out to someone, her Portuguese rapid-fire and urgent. A man's voice answered, and then stronger hands were lifting me. I caught a glimpse of an elderly gentleman with a silver beard before the world went dark again. I came to in a simple kitchen that smelled of herbs and something savory bubbling on the stove. The elderly woman was pressing a glass of water into my hands while talking softly in Portuguese. When she saw my eyes open, her concerned expression melted into a gentle smile. "English?" she asked hopefully. I nodded weakly. "Yes. I'm sorry, I don't speak Portuguese." "Rosa," she said, pointing to herself. Then she gestured to the man standing in the doorway. "Antonio. My husband." "Maya," I managed. "Thank you for." I don't know what happened. Rosa said something to Antonio, who disappeared and returned with a bowl of soup. As I ate, they watched me with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Through a combination of Rosa's limited English, Antonio's slightly better vocabulary, and a lot of hand gestures, I tried to explain my situation. Rosa's expression grew fiercer as I spoke, and when I mentioned Barcelona, she spat out something in Portuguese that I knew was a curse. Antonio looked thoughtful, his eyes kind but assessing. "You need work?" Rosa finally asked. "Harvest time. Many hands needed." I nodded eagerly. "Yes. I can work. I'm strong, I learn fast." Rosa and Antonio exchanged a long look, some unspoken conversation passing between them. Then Rosa stood and gestured for me to follow. She led me to a small guest room with whitewashed walls and a window overlooking the vineyard. A handmade quilt covered the narrow bed. "You stay tonight," she said firmly. "Tomorrow, we talk about work." That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, I powered on my phone for the first time since charging it in Barcelona. Part of me hoped for messages from Derek, some sign of remorse or concern. Instead, there was nothing. It had been 4 days since he'd left me on that street. 4 days, and he hadn't bothered to check if I was alive. But there was a message from David, sent that morning. "Maya, getting worried. You haven't responded to my emails in a week. Everything okay?" I stared at his message for a long time. Then I typed, "I'm safe. Can't talk now. We'll explain soon. Please don't worry." It wasn't much, but it was something. A thread connecting me to the person I used to be, even as I began to imagine who I might become. The next morning, I woke to roosters crowing and sunlight streaming through the window. Someone had left clothes on the chair, a simple cotton dress and sturdy work boots that looked worn but clean. They fit loosely, but they were practical. In the kitchen, Rosa beamed when she saw me, immediately serving thick slices of fresh bread with butter and honey, and strong bitter coffee. After breakfast, Antonio led me out to the vineyard. The morning air was cool, the sun just clearing the eastern hills. He showed me the grapevines, heavy with clusters of dark purple grapes, and demonstrated how to check for ripeness by gently squeezing the fruit. "Colheita," he said, pointing to the grapes. "Harvest." For the next 3 hours, I learned the basics of grape picking. Antonio was patient, correcting my technique when I pulled too hard or missed ripe clusters. By midday, my back ached from bending, my hands were stained purple, and I'd filled exactly 3 baskets to Antonio's 15. Rosa brought lunch to the vineyard, simple but delicious: bread, cheese, olives, and sliced tomatoes drizzled with olive oil. "You learn fast," Antonio said approvingly as we ate in the shade of an old oak tree. "For city lady." I laughed, surprised by how good it felt. "How did you know I'm from the city?" He gestured at my hands, which despite 4 days of hardship were still soft and uncalloused. No farm hands. But good spirit. This matters more. Over the next 2 weeks, I fell into a rhythm. Wake at dawn. Work the vineyard. Learn Portuguese words from Rosa during lunch. Work until sunset. Dinner with Rosa and Antonio, usually simple meals made from their garden and local ingredients. Sleep hard, too exhausted for the spiraling thoughts that had once kept me awake. The physical work was demanding in ways my city life had never prepared me for. My body protested, muscles I didn't know I had screaming in pain. Blisters formed on my palms and feet, but gradually, something changed. The blisters hardened into calluses. My soft arms developed actual muscle definition. I could work a full morning without my back giving out. More importantly, the constant mental replay of my abandonment began to fade, replaced by immediate physical concerns. Did I miss that cluster? Should I bring water up to Antonio? What's the Portuguese word for basket again? Rosa paid me under the table, small amounts in cash that I carefully saved. When I tried to pay for the room and meals, she waved me off. "You work," she said firmly. "Is enough." But I could see the strain in her movements, the way Antonio winced when lifting heavy loads. They were in their early 70s, and the harvest was brutal work. They needed help they couldn't afford to properly pay for. 3 weeks into my stay, Rosa's expression grew sad over dinner. She showed me a photograph from a wooden box on the mantel. A young woman with Rosa's eyes and Antonio's smile, holding a toddler. Katerina, Rosa said softly. Nossa filha. Our daughter. She pointed far away. Canada. Toronto. She showed me more photos. Her granddaughter, now maybe 4 years old, growing up thousands of miles away. Rosa's eyes filled with tears as she touched the child's face in the picture. You? Rosa started, then switched to Portuguese, frustrated. She put her hand on her heart, then pointed at me, then at the photo of her daughter. I understood. She saw something in me that reminded her of Katerina. Maybe that's why she'd taken me in. I'm honored, I said softly, covering her hand with mine. To remind you of her. That night, I went to my room and finally powered on my phone fully. I'd been avoiding it, using it only for the translation app and keeping it on airplane mode. Now I connected to Rosa and Antonio's Wi-Fi and watched notifications flood in. Emails from David, increasingly concerned. A few from old college friends I'd lost touch with years ago. One from my former marketing mentor, Lisa, subject line, job opportunity. And then, buried in spam, an email from Derek. Sent just 2 days ago. Subject line, we need to talk. My hands shook as I opened it. Maya, I know you're upset, but this has gone on long enough. Barcelona was a joke that went too far, I admit it. But you're being dramatic by disappearing like this. My boss asked where you were at the company dinner last week. It's embarrassing. Come home so we can discuss this like adults. I read it 3 times, waiting for an apology that never came. Not I'm sorry I abandoned you. Not I was wrong. Just annoyance that I was making him look bad. I opened Lisa's email next. She'd heard I might be looking for consulting opportunities and had connected me with a sustainable wine company looking for a marketing strategist. Remote work, flexible hours, good pay. I don't know what's going on with you and Derek, she wrote, but you always had incredible talent, don't waste it. I replied before I could overthink it. Very interested. When can we talk? The next morning, a car pulled up the long driveway to the Quinta. A well-dressed man in his 40s emerged, eyeing the rustic farmhouse with obvious skepticism. Rosa stiffened beside me. Miguel, she said quietly. Antonio's son. Miguel barely greeted me before launching into rapid Portuguese with his parents. I caught my name several times, along with words I didn't know but whose tone was unmistakably suspicious. Rosa's voice rose defensively. Antonio remained calm but firm. Finally, Miguel turned to me, speaking in perfect English with a Lisbon accent. My parents tell me you've been staying here 3 weeks. For free. I've been working, I said carefully. Harvest help. And before that? How did you end up here? His eyes narrowed. It's very convenient, an American woman with no money, no connections, no history, just appearing at their door. Miguel. Rosa's tone was sharp, but I understood his suspicion. To him, I probably looked like a scammer taking advantage of his elderly parents' kindness. I took a deep breath. You want to know if I'm trying to con your parents? That's fair. You don't know me. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. My name is Maya Chen. I worked for Harman Marketing Group in Chicago for 6 years before I got married. My husband abandoned me in Barcelona 3 weeks ago as a joke. I sold my watch to get bus fare here. Your parents saved my life when I collapsed on their road, and they've been kind enough to let me work for room and board while I figure out my next steps. I showed him my LinkedIn profile, my old work portfolio, even the email chain with Lisa. I'm not here to take advantage of anyone. I'm here because I had nowhere else to go. And your parents gave me a chance when I needed one most. Miguel studied my phone, his expression slowly shifting. He said something to his parents in Portuguese. Rosa responded, her tone softer now. Antonio added something that made Miguel's shoulders drop. Miguel handed back my phone. My parents told me that when they found you, you reminded them of Katerina. His voice was quieter. My sister. She ran away from an abusive boyfriend 12 years ago. Ended up in Canada with nothing. A Portuguese family there helped her start over. He looked at Rosa, whose eyes were wet. She met her husband because of their kindness. Now she has a good life. A daughter. But she can't come home because of work, visa complications. Understanding dawned. They see me as a chance to pay it forward. Something like that. Miguel managed a small smile. I apologize for my suspicion. We've had problems before. People taking advantage. You were protecting them. I respect that. Over coffee, Miguel explained the Quintas situation. Rosa and Antonio were getting older, struggling to maintain the property alone. They'd been discussing selling, but it had been in the family for generations. Miguel lived in Lisbon, working for a tech company, unable to run the vineyard himself. If you're serious about staying, he said, they could use real help. Someone younger, capable, but there would need to be legal arrangements. Work visa, contracts. I'm serious, I said. More serious than I've been about anything in a long time. The next weeks blurred together. I worked the vineyard by day, my body finally adapting to the demands. In the evenings, I worked with Miguel on visa applications, researching the legal requirements for extended stay and work permits in Portugal. The process was complicated, but there was a path forward through seasonal agricultural work. I also started helping Rosa with the Quintas' tiny guest house. They rented out 2 rooms during tourist season, but their marketing was limited to a faded sign on the main road and a years-old listing on an outdated website. This, at least, was something I knew how to fix. Rosa, do you mind if I look at your booking system? I asked one evening. She brought out a worn ledger, handwritten entries dating back years. My marketing instincts kicked in immediately. Within a week, I'd created a simple but professional website, set up social media accounts, and listed the rooms on major travel platforms. I wrote descriptions emphasizing the authentic experience, the family-owned vineyard, the home-cooked meals. Bookings started trickling in within days. Then more steadily. Rosa watched in amazement as I managed the reservations on her old laptop. You make magic with computer, she said, shaking her head. Not magic. Just marketing. I showed her the booking calendar, now filling up for the next 2 months. People want authentic experiences. You've been offering that all along. You just needed someone to tell the story. Antonio appeared in the doorway. Maya, we want to talk business. My heart skipped. Was this it? Were they asking me to leave now that I'd helped increase their bookings? But in the small dining room, Miguel was waiting with legal papers spread across the table. Antonio pulled out a bottle of aged port wine, the good stuff they usually saved for special occasions. We've been discussing, Miguel said, his formal tone softening. My parents want to retire in the next few years. Not sell the Quinta, but step back from the hard work. They need a partner, someone younger who can take over operations gradually. Rosa pushed a document toward me. 25%, she said in halting English. Partnership. You learn everything. Winemaking, vineyard, guest house. You teach us computers, modern business. She tapped the paper. Legal. Fair. I stared at the partnership agreement, my vision blurring with tears. But you barely know me. We know enough, Antonio said firmly. You work hard. You respect the land. You make things better. Not for you, but for everyone. He poured 4 glasses of port. And you need home. We need help. Is good for both. What about my visa? I asked. I can't accept this if I can't stay legally. Miguel smiled. The partnership helps. Agricultural business owner has different visa track. With the consulting job your friend mentioned, you'll have multiple income sources. Between that and the partnership, we can build a solid application. That night, I signed the papers with shaking hands. Rosa hugged me tight, whispering something in Portuguese I didn't fully understand but felt in my bones. Antonio clapped my shoulder, his eyes bright. Later, alone in my room, I finally composed an email to David. I told him everything. Derek's cruelty in Barcelona, my impulsive decision to come to Portugal, the vineyard, Rosa and Antonio, the partnership. I apologized for disappearing, for the distance I'd created between us over the years, for not listening when he tried to warn me about Derek. His response came within an hour. Maya. Holy shit. I'm just glad you're safe. I always knew you were stronger than Derek gave you credit for. When you're ready, I want to visit. Meet these people who helped you. And maybe we can actually talk, like we used to before. Well, before. Love you, sis. I cried then, finally allowing myself to feel not just the grief of my marriage ending, but the relief of reconnecting with the family I had left. The next crisis hit 3 weeks later. The guest house air conditioning unit died during a heat wave with 4 rooms fully booked. The repair estimate came back at €3,000, money Rosa and Antonio didn't have readily available. I watched them huddle over the quote, their faces drawn with worry. The guests were complaining. One threatened to leave and post a bad review. "How much do we have in the harvest account?" I asked. Rosa showed me. "Not enough, especially with upcoming expenses for bottling equipment." I went to my room and counted the cash I'd saved from harvest work and my first payment from the consulting job with the wine company. €1,400. Not enough alone, but maybe. I found Isabella, a local schoolteacher who'd become a friend through the weekly English conversation group at the church. She'd mentioned once that she had savings from an inheritance she didn't know what to do with. "I know this is a huge ask," I told her over coffee. "But Rosa and Antonio are in trouble." I explained the situation, showed her the partnership papers, the bookings we'd built up. "I can pay you back within 4 months from my consulting income and harvest bonus. With interest." Isabella studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled. "You know what I see? I see someone who's invested everything in this place. Not because you have to, but because you believe in it." She pulled out her checkbook. "Consider it an investment. 10% return when you can manage it, no rush." We got the AC fixed the next day. The guests stayed. The reviews remained positive. When I told Rosa and Antonio what I'd done, Rosa cried and insisted on adding me to the family photos on the mantle. Antonio simply nodded, but his hand on my shoulder spoke volumes. "You are home now," he said. Truly, 4 months slipped by like water. The vineyard became as familiar as my own heartbeat. I learned to taste wine properly, to understand the subtle differences in grape varietals, to know when the fruit was perfectly ready for harvest. My Portuguese improved from halting to conversational. The consulting work with the sustainable wine company expanded, bringing in steady income that I carefully split between savings, paying back Isabella, and reinvesting in the quinta. The local community slowly accepted me. The skepticism faded as they saw me at church, at the market, working alongside Rosa and Antonio. The village priest, Father Jose, even asked me to help with their English mass for tourists. "You brought new life to old vines," he said, his rheumy eyes kind. "This is good for village. Too many young people leave for Lisbon. For Porto. We need new blood." Through it all, I kept my phone mostly offline, checking emails only once a day. David and I texted regularly now, our relationship slowly rebuilding. He'd booked a flight to visit in December. I'd started video calls with Isabella's help to meet his wife and 2 kids, my niece and nephew I'd barely known. Then, on a Tuesday morning in late January, an email arrived that made my blood run cold. Subject: "I know where you are. From Derek Morrison. Maya, it's taken me months and a private investigator, but I finally tracked you down to that backwater vineyard in Portugal. This has gone on long enough. Whatever point you were trying to make, you've made it. My boss has been asking questions. Your college friends have been posting worried messages. Do you know how this makes me look? I'm flying into Porto on Thursday. Be ready to have an actual conversation about our future. We can work through this like adults." I read it 3 times, my hands trembling. He was coming. In 3 days. Panic seized my chest. For a moment, I was back on that Barcelona street at 3 a.m., powerless and abandoned. Then Rosa's hand covered mine. Bad news? She'd learned to read my expressions. "Derek. My husband. He's coming here." Rosa's eyes narrowed. "The one who left you?" I nodded, unable to speak. She stood, walking to the small desk in the corner and returning with an envelope. Good timing then. "Miguel brought these yesterday. Was waiting for right moment." Inside were legal documents. Divorce papers, drafted by Miguel's lawyer friend in Lisbon, citing abandonment and irreconcilable differences. The lawyer had included a notarized statement from Marta in Barcelona, documenting my arrival at the shelter. Everything was ready to file. "You choose," Rosa said firmly, tapping the papers. "He doesn't choose anymore." That evening, I told Antonio and Miguel about Derek's email. Miguel immediately offered to be present when Derek arrived. "You shouldn't face him alone." "I won't be alone," I said, looking around the kitchen where Rosa was cooking, where Antonio was reviewing harvest notes, where I'd spent countless evenings learning to be myself again. I have family now. The next 2 days passed in a strange suspended state. I finalized the divorce papers, making sure every detail was correct. I confirmed with Lisa that the consulting contract was solid, proof of independent income. I met with the lawyer about my visa status, now strong with the business partnership and legitimate work. Isabella came by with the village priest and the head of the wine cooperative, all offering to be present Thursday if I needed support. You're one of us now, the cooperative president said firmly. We protect our own. Thursday dawned clear and bright, the January sun cold but beautiful over the terraced vineyards. I was in the small wine processing room, learning from Antonio how to test acidity levels. When I heard it, the distinct sound of an expensive car engine struggling up the gravel road, my heart lurched. Antonio squeezed my shoulder. You are strong. Remember this. I walked outside, wiping my hands on my work apron. A sleek BMW rental sat in the driveway, incongruous against the rustic quinta. Derek emerged, designer sunglasses perched on his perfectly styled hair. He wore tailored traveling clothes that probably cost more than a month of my consulting income. He looked exactly the same, but somehow smaller, less substantial, like a photograph that had lost resolution. His eyes scanned the property with obvious disdain before landing on me. For a moment, his expression froze. I watched shock register as he took in my work boots, my sun-browned arms, my hair pulled back in a simple braid, no makeup, no designer clothes. Maya? He removed his sunglasses slowly. Jesus Christ, what happened to you? Life happened, Derek. My voice was calmer than I expected. What are you doing here? He spread his arms in a gesture I'd once found charming. I came to bring you home, obviously. This has gone on long enough, don't you think? Whatever point you were making about Barcelona, this isn't about making a point. I took a step forward, conscious of Rosa, Antonio, and Miguel emerging from the house behind me. This is about making a life. His expression flickered with irritation. A life? Maya? Be serious. You're doing manual labor in the middle of nowhere. He gestured dismissively at the vineyard. This is some kind of eat, pray, love fantasy that you'll regret when reality sets in. I'm part owner of this quinta, I said evenly. I have a 25% partnership in a 4-generation family business. I have consulting clients. I'm applying for a work visa. This isn't a fantasy. It's my reality. His face flushed red. Part owner? Maya. Stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. You don't know anything about running a... Mr. Morrison. Miguel stepped forward, his English crisp and professional. I'm Miguel Costa, son of the property owners and also a lawyer. My parents have legal partnership with Maya. All properly documented and filed. Derek's eyes narrowed as he assessed Miguel, trying to determine if he was a romantic threat. I could see the gears turning, looking for an angle to undermine my credibility. Look, Derek said, his tone shifting to the reasonable voice he used in business negotiations. I'll admit Barcelona was handled badly. It was meant to be a joke that went too far. I've apologized. You haven't apologized. The words came out harder than I intended. You sent an email complaining about how my disappearance makes you look bad. Fine. I'm apologizing now. But his eyes were cold, calculating. I'm sorry I left you in Barcelona. It was immature. Can we move past this now and discuss our future rationally? Why did you even look for me, Derek? I asked quietly. Why now, after 4 months? He shifted uncomfortably, and I saw it, the tell I'd learned to recognize over 10 years together. He was about to lie. Because I care about you. Because we're married, Derek. My voice was steel. The truth. His jaw tightened. Fine. My boss asked about you at the New Year's Eve party. Said he hadn't seen you at any company events lately. Then your college friend Jennifer started posting worried messages on Facebook tagging me, asking if anyone had heard from you. It was becoming awkward. Bad for your image, I finished for him. Our image, he snapped, the careful control slipping. Yes, okay? It looks suspicious when a man's wife disappears for months. People were starting to ask questions. HR wanted to know if there was a situation they should be aware of. Do you know how that feels? Do you know how it feels, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm, to be abandoned in a foreign city at 2 a.m. with no money, no phone charger, no way to get help? Do you know how it feels to be so financially controlled by your husband that you can't even buy a meal without his credit cards? Do you know what it's like to realize your partner orchestrated your public humiliation with his friends as entertainment? I thought you'd call your brother. I thought you'd throw a fit, call me crying, and we'd hash it out. I didn't think you'd just vanish. You blocked my number, Derek. You and all your friends. That wasn't spur of the moment. That was coordinated. He had the grace to look ashamed for a moment. Then the anger returned. So what? This is revenge? You're going to throw away 10 years of marriage, a good life, financial security, because of one bad night? One bad night? I felt my control finally snap. Derek, you spent 10 years making me smaller. You convinced me to quit my job. You took over all our finances, leaving me with no access to our accounts. You discouraged my friendships, my hobbies, anything that didn't revolve around supporting your career. Barcelona wasn't one bad night. It was the culmination of a decade of treating me like a possession instead of a partner. That's not fair. I provided. A golden cage is still a cage. Silence fell over the driveway. Derek stared at me, his face cycling through shock, anger, and something that might have been genuine pain. I loved you, he said quietly. I thought we had a good life. You loved the version of me that served your purposes. The Maya who didn't argue, didn't have her own ambitions, didn't take up too much space. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope. These are divorce papers, Derek. Already filed. I'm citing abandonment. I have documentation from the women's shelter in Barcelona, witness statements, everything. He stared at the papers like they might burn him. You can't be serious. I'm giving up my claim to the house, the cars, all of it. I only want what's mine, my inheritance money that's in our joint account, and my personal belongings that are left. Everything else is yours, Maya. His voice cracked slightly. You'll regret this. When the novelty wears off and you're 45, still hauling grapes in the sun, you'll remember what you gave up. Maybe, I conceded, but I'd rather risk regretting choices I made than live with the certainty of regretting a life I let someone else choose for me. A car engine sounded on the road. Then another. I turned to see Isabella's small Fiat pulling up, followed by Father Jose's ancient sedan, and behind them the wine cooperative president's truck. They parked and emerged, moving to stand in a loose semicircle around me. Not threatening but present. Witnesses. Support. Derek looked around, finally understanding. What is this? This is my community, I said simply. My family. My life. Rosa stepped forward then, speaking in rapid Portuguese. Antonio translated, his English careful and deliberate. She says, the road back to Porto is dangerous after dark. You should leave now to reach the city before nightfall. Derek looked at me one last time, and I saw in his face the moment he realized he'd lost. Not just me, but the control he'd always taken for granted. His fingers closed around the envelope. You'll come crawling back, he said, but the threat sounded hollow even to him. When this falls apart, I won't. Goodbye, Derek. He got into his BMW without another word. The car's expensive engine purred to life, and then he was driving away, disappearing down the winding road just as the van had disappeared down that Barcelona street 4 months ago. But this time, I wasn't alone. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't lost. Rosa took my hand on one side, Antonio on the other. Miguel stood behind me, a silent pillar of support. Isabella, Father Jose, and the others moved closer. A circle of presence and acceptance. I waited until the sound of Derek's car faded completely. Then I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for a decade. Is done? Rosa asked gently. Yes, I said, surprised by how light I felt. It's done. That evening, the entire village seemed to materialize. Someone brought wine, another brought cheese, someone else produced a guitar. What started as a quiet dinner became an impromptu celebration in the Quinta's courtyard. I found myself in the center, being pulled into dances I didn't know, laughing at jokes I only half understood, surrounded by people who'd adopted me as one of their own. Later, much later, after the last guests had left and Rosa and Antonio had gone to bed, I stood in the vineyard under a sky full of stars. Miguel found me there, 2 glasses of port in his hands. How are you feeling? He asked, handing me a glass. Free, I said, and meant it. Terrified, but free. The terrified part will pass. The free part is forever, if you protect it. We sipped the port in comfortable silence, looking out over the terraced vines that had become my anchor. You know what's strange? I said after a while. Derek thought abandoning me in Barcelona would teach me a lesson about dependence, about how much I needed him, and instead, he taught me that I never needed him at all. I just thought I did because he spent years convincing me I wasn't capable of surviving alone. Miguel smiled. My mother says you're the daughter she got to keep. My sister is happy in Canada, but she can't come home. You came home without meaning to. Do you mind? That they've adopted me like this? He considered the question seriously. At first, maybe a little. But then I saw what you've done for them. The bookings, the marketing, the energy you've brought. You've given them a reason to keep the quinta instead of selling. You've given them purpose. He paused. And you've given me permission to live my life in Lisbon without guilt. So no, I don't mind. I'm grateful. 6 months later, I stood in the same courtyard, this time with David, his wife Sarah, and their kids. David kept shaking his head in amazement. I can't believe this is your life now, he said, watching as his children helped Antonio feed the chickens. 4 months ago, you were trapped, I finished. I was trapped, and I didn't even realize how bad it had gotten until someone cut the locks. Worst rescue ever. Sarah laughed. Abandon someone in a foreign country to set them free. Sometimes, I said, watching Rosa teach my niece how to knead bread dough. The cruelest actions yield the greatest gifts. Derek tried to break me. Instead, he accidentally freed me. My phone buzzed. A notification from the consulting company, letting me know they wanted to expand my contract and bring me on for a major project. Another notification showed my visa application moving forward, now with strong backing from the business partnership and my growing portfolio of clients. David noticed my smile. Good news? Just thinking about something Rosa told me when I first got here. She said before is not gone, it's just sleeping. She was right. The Maya who loved marketing, who was good at connecting with people, who had ambitions and dreams, that person wasn't dead. She was just waiting for permission to wake up. And now, she's wide awake. And she's never going back to sleep. That night, I wrote in the journal I'd started keeping. Not for anyone else, just for me. A record of this unexpected chapter, this life I'd built from the ashes of the old one. People ask if I regret not going home that first day, not calling David for money, not fighting to save my marriage. The truth is complicated. I regret the years I spent making myself smaller. I regret not seeing the red flags sooner. Not listening to the people who loved me when they tried to warn me. I regret that it took something as cruel as Barcelona to wake me up. But I don't regret getting on that bus to Portugal. I don't regret collapsing on Rosa and Antonio's road. I don't regret choosing the unknown over the familiar. Because here, in this quiet vineyard, surrounded by ancient vines and new family, I finally found something I'd lost without realizing it was gone. I found myself. Not the self I thought I should be. Not the self someone else needed me to be. Just me. Maya. Whole. Free. Home. And if someone has to abandon you in a foreign country at 2 a.m. for you to discover your own strength, well, maybe you were already lost, and didn't know you needed finding. I closed the journal and looked out my window at the vineyard bathed in moonlight, at the life I'd built with my own hands, at the future I was creating one day at a time. Derek had tried to teach me a lesson about helplessness. Instead, I'd learned about resilience, community, and the incredible things that can grow when you plant yourself in fertile ground. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. My only regret? Not helping it out the door sooner.